Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, October 13th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about a brand new memo that was leaked from the Senate Leadership Fund, a Republican PAC here that focuses tens of millions of dollars in the 2024 Senate races after a new set of polls that they internally conducted, never wanted any of these numbers to be released publicly, found its way to Politico, which Politico reported on it, finding that the internal GOP polling memo says that Senate Republicans are still behind in key and crucial battleground states. And they really go to show that roughly 25, 24, 23 days until Election Day, there is a lot of work the Republican Party needs to do to make up lost ground in these battleground Senate races, and honestly, it becomes much more unthinkable that this even comes to reality. And that largely is because the Republican Party started out in the 2024 Senate races at such a major disadvantage. But the fact remains, the Republican Party promised that this leadership fund, the millions of dollars they were going to spend in states like Wisconsin, recently announced 2 days ago, $6.6 million in Wisconsin. And the polling we actually see today actually sheds some light on why the Republicans are targeting and more so micro-targeting some of these battleground states rather than a blanket spend because of the numbers they are looking at that were never meant for public eyes. And when Politico captured this, they are right. It is actually, in my opinion, even more than just saying they are still behind in the key Senate races. It shows that there has been minimal movement over the past 6 months, despite tens of millions of dollars, over $100 million spent across Republican campaigns to change the state of these races in a way that just simply hasn't happened. Democrats are still pulling far ahead in the final stretch of the campaign. It looks like many of these races are close to being over for the GOP. And to actually give you a visual of what this memo actually was, Politico actually uploaded the Senate polling and media update that was released on October 8th, 2024. Remember that article that we're seeing here showing the Republicans spend $6.6 million in the state of Wisconsin? Likely informed by the data that is revealed in this memo. So let's unpack it. Let's talk about it for the 2024 election. Let's talk about what the numbers are telling us. Well, let's go ahead and take a look. They talk about some wins here. They say Jon Tester's image and ballot position upside down, pushing it there, gave Tim Sheehy a small but durable lead. They closed in the race with Dave McCormick. They got Sherrod Brown below 50% on the ballot, and they got Wisconsin narrowed up. But what they leave out here is that what's interesting here in the battleground states is that the Democrats are still polling ahead. For instance, take a look at some of these numbers here. First of all, this is all confidential. They did not want this stuff released here. But what they found in the Senate race is that Kari Lake is losing to Ruben Gallego by 5 points. Now, this is a more tame number. Remember that internals typically skew towards the party that funds them, but in this particular scenario, we are looking at an instance in which Republicans are still behind in their own internal polls. And that matters. It isn't just that they're still behind, it's more than that. They're looking at numbers that show the Democratic Party ahead when Trump and Harris are tied. Trump and Harris are tied. Take a look at those numbers, right? You can see that a tied race doesn't translate to Kari Lake doing better. In the state of Maryland, no shock to anybody, but Kamala Harris leads in the presidential race, but that Senate race is what Republicans have been spending money on. They have been investing. They said, this is the race we can win in deep blue Maryland. Clearly, the numbers say you can't win. Republicans down 7. In the state of Michigan, this is a big one. You can see that what we have found is that the Senate race shows the Democrats with an 8-point advantage. 8-point advantage in the Senate race compared to the presidential race where Harris only has a 3-point lead. That's a major delta, and it's a massive lead for the Democrats in a state that Republicans swore up and down would be close and competitive. Continuing on to Montana. This is the good number for them, but it's actually not that good because it says Jon Tester is only losing by 4. Guess what? The Democratic pollsters say he's losing by 7. So what do we take into account? Maybe these numbers are catching something that Democrats aren't. Or maybe we're in the middle of it, where Jon Tester's losing by roughly 5. But losing by 5 when Trump is winning by 17 shows that there's a lot of crossover support, which can explain some of the numbers that we're going to see continuing throughout this memo. The next state is the state of Nevada, a state where Jackie Rosen has maintained a strong advantage, a tied presidential race, resulting in a 7-point lead for the Democrats in the Senate race. Tied presidential 7-point lead for Democrats in the Senate race. Again, these are Republican internal polls, never meant to reach public viewing, and here we are reaching it. Democrats are pulling ahead in these battleground states. And we'll visually look at it on a map in just a moment here. In Ohio, this is a really big one because it shows Trump with a 4-point advantage over Harris, which is a little bit less than what the averages have been showing in Ohio. So I'd honestly shift this margin just slightly here, but what it shows for Sherrod Brown is a 6-point lead, a 6-point lead statewide when Donald Trump is winning by roughly 4. The only saving grace here for Republicans is that neither of the two candidates has crossed that threshold of 45%, but you can't ignore the fact that the Democrats holding this 6-point advantage, everybody in Ohio knows who Bernie Moreno is, right? You're seeing his name ID is up. The overall, amount of people who talk about him is up. The media market's there. All of it is up in conversation around Bernie Moreno. Everybody is talking about him, constantly and always. You are going to find that it is really interesting that Sherrod Brown has been able to maintain this lead. And so continuing on to the state of Pennsylvania, what do we have? In the Senate race, the Democrats hold a 2-point advantage. Now, the catch here for Democrats is that Pennsylvania might be the sleeper race for them, in the truest words, right? You're looking at a numbers game here where the Democrats are neck and neck. When it comes down to the presidential, when it comes down to the Senate, it's a 1-point lead in the presidential, it's a 2-point lead in the Senate race. Regardless, though, it's a lead nonetheless. And it's a lead that comes at a time where in the final stretch of the campaign, unless something changes over the next 3 weeks that can swing the race by 3 points to the right, it isn't going to change dramatically enough that results in Democrats losing this Senate race. And it also is, again, a Republican internal poll, which means chances are Republicans are actually doing worse than what these numbers are showing. And then Texas, this is the one that really gets me. Finding out this number was one that really shook me to my core because I was looking at it and saying, overall, a 1-point lead for Ted Cruz is really bad, especially when Trump is running ahead by 5 points. 5 points is roughly on par with that of the 2020 election. A slight underperformance of less than half a point or roughly half a point, but a 1-point lead in the Senate race, that shows a massive improvement for Democrats, especially compared to where it was before. Look, they released their mid-September number. What does it say? Ted Cruz led by 3, Donald Trump led by 4, an improvement for Trump on the top of the ticket, a loss in support for Ted Cruz at the bottom of the ballot. So a really big shift here, one that shows that Texas, again, if the Republican internals overestimate Republican support, I do have to ask, what do the actual numbers tell us about this race? And so continuing into here, the final state we're going to look at is the state of Wisconsin that shows us that Tammy Baldwin maintains a 1-point lead while Donald Trump maintains a 1-point lead in the presidential race. Again, continuing in that mind, right? Overestimation for Republicans in almost every single instance you are seeing here. The Democrats are doing quite well in these Senate races. And I want you to see it visually because it helps just orient exactly why this is such a bad look for Republicans. October 8th, 2024, they are so close to Election Day and the things are not falling into place the way they should. You can see it here more visually to see Gallego +5, Alsobrooks +7, Slotkin +8, Sheehy +4, Rosen +7, Brown +6, Casey +2, Cruz +1, Baldwin +1. Only 2 out of these battleground states, Republicans are winning here. And this would give them the Senate majority, but not by a lot whatsoever. It'd be 51-49, and Texas is right on the cusp in ruby red Texas that ain't so ruby red anymore. Looking at the Senate map, though, let's visually look at it. Let's take a look. Let's characterize all those safe states for both parties so we're not wasting time here. But here's where we are, right? This is where we start off when it comes down to the races. Let's go ahead and just not characterize any of the states that are being polled here, so that does not include Maryland. But let's continue, right? Minnesota's not there. Virginia's not there. New Mexico's not there. Hawaii's not there. California and Washington are not there. Let's map it because it really goes to show just, where Democrats are. In Nevada, it's a 7-point race. It's a 5-point race in Arizona. It's a 7-point race in Maryland. It's a 6-point race in Ohio. Right? It's an 8-point race in Michigan. Wisconsin is coming down to being roughly a point. Pennsylvania is coming down to 2 points. Montana, 4 points. Texas, a point. Florida's not pulled in there, so let's throw it in the safe red column. Point being, Republicans will be at 51-49. And Texas, honestly, is a tilt margin because you're talking about 1% based on the knowing that these polls overestimate Republican support could be less than a point. Overall, very, very close race. Really good results here for Democrats in a way that, honestly, they have been quite worried nationally, right? A lot of those public polls were telling us that Democrats were seeing a bit of decrease in support in the swing states on the presidential, in the swing, Senate races, in the swing House races. But when it came down to some of these, interesting data points from Republican pollsters or some district-level pollsters in those swing districts, or in some cases even some high-quality pollsters really pushed this other narrative that was, wait a minute, Democrats actually aren't doing that bad. Even in some of the worst polls for Kamala Harris on the presidential level in states like Arizona and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, Democrats were still running ahead in the Senate races there. And that is not an accident. That is because Republicans have nominated really poor candidates across the board. It's a story that goes all the way back to 2018, when Republicans tried to replicate Donald Trump and lost key Senate races. They tried it again in 2020 and lost key Senate races. They tried it again in 2022 and lost key Senate races. Think about it for a moment. What resulted in Republicans losing Arizona and Nevada in 2018? Wrong Republicans. What happened to Republicans losing the Senate majority in 2020? The wrong type of Republican. Think about people like Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue in the state of Georgia. Granted, David Perdue was the incumbent, but why was he brushed away? Because voters didn't like him because of his association with Trump. Rejected on both ballots. You can look at 2022. Why is it that John Fetterman won against Dr. Oz? Donald Trump was that common denominator because he tried to be Donald Trump. Same thing in the state of Arizona. Why is it that Blake Masters lost? Why is it that Adam Laxalt lost in the state of Nevada? Why is it that Don Bolduc lost in the state of New Hampshire? Why is it that Herschel Walker lost in the state of Georgia? Why is it that these Republicans who try to be and mimic Donald Trump to a T, no pun intended, lose their Senate races? Well, it's because of the Mr. T. Donald Trump, who does not have an overall A-plus brand. He himself receives an excusal from the American public, but the candidates who replicate him simply do not. And that's what we're seeing happening this time around. I'm not going to argue that Mike Rogers is a replication of Donald Trump, but it's the party and the brand that is toxic enough that unless your name is Donald J. Trump, you're not winning on that ballot with that style of campaign or attitude. Think about people like Carrie Lake or people like Sam Brown. Sam Brown ran a very right-wing campaign in 2022, has now tried to walk it back. Voters aren't buying it. In Arizona, Carrie Lake refused to accept her 2022 governor election results as recently as the Senate debate that took place just a few days ago. Wouldn't even admit her own defeat in 2022, very similar to Donald Trump, underperforming him by roughly 10, 12 points consistently. In the state of Ohio, right, what you're seeing, same thing. Bernie Moreno is the more extreme Republican candidate, very much MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. Voters aren't responding to that to the same way they're responding to Donald Trump, again, for a variety of different reasons. And you're just seeing across the board here, Democrats are maintaining advantages that Republicans were naysayers on. That when it came down to being on Fox News, when it came down to One American News Network and News Nation and CNN and MSNBC, and they went all across the ideological spectrum of the media, and they say, you know, these polls are wrong. We are up. Our numbers show we're up. We are focused. That's why we're spending money in Wisconsin, because we know we're up in Wisconsin and we want to solidify that lead. Wait a minute. That's not the truth. Does it show that Wisconsin's tightening? Sure. But it informs that decision that makes Wisconsin a state that they now invest $7 more billion in. But what does it also show? That Michigan is no longer this attainable race for Republicans. If Kamala Harris is ahead by 3 and, you know, you're seeing that the race there for Lisa Slotkin is an 8-point lead for Democrats, you're not investing much anymore in the final stretch of the campaign because that's a lead that really is insurmountable. And again, they mentioned these points, right? They're looking at states like Montana where they're proud about the numbers there. Sure, they've turned it around. You can see that the numbers in Montana have in fact changed. When we were doing this poll a little bit further back, the numbers were better for Tim Sheehy, but at the earlier stages of August, they were better for Jon Tester. They've gotten better for Tim Sheehy, best in late September, but, you know, gotten to a point where Jon Tester has narrowed up the race a little bit, but not enough to win the race. That's what they're proud about. And in their own right, sure, be proud about that, right? You flipped a Senate race from blue to red, and Republicans are probably going to win it. But if I was a Republican firm, I wouldn't be proud about a 4-point lead in a state that my presidential candidate is winning by 17. It shows there are far more crossover voters that really do translate to all of the battleground Senate races and battleground swing districts. That's really where we're at, right? That's what causes damage to the Republican brand, to the Republicans that are running in this race, because they are underperforming Donald Trump, and that in its own right is embarrassing. It's in its own right something that does damage to the Republican brand, labels it as toxic, and even though they are repeating the same identical talking points that they're getting from Team Trump and Team MAGA and Save America PAC and all of these organizations, it isn't landing with the average voter unless it's Donald Trump himself doing it. Do these Senate numbers mean that Kamala Harris is going to win the presidency? Not necessarily. Do these numbers apply to an electoral map mean she wins the presidency? The answer right now is a bit up in the air. Right now, no, right? What you'll find is that Nevada's a tie. Arizona's a tie. Trump would win Ohio. Trump would win Montana, obviously. He'd win Texas. He'd win Wisconsin. Harris would probably hold her own. It'd be a competitive race, and it would really come down to the wire. Pennsylvania going one way, Wisconsin the other way. Regardless, though, it's a competitive race. Senate races, though, not so much. Democrats maintaining the advantage, not enough time for Republicans to really crack down on the lead in a number of these states. I wouldn't be shocked if they're missing their mark on some points, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they're overestimating Republican support in some states in a way that could be really detrimental to the Republican Party's expectations and leads in some of these states, and really just squash the Republican Party's hopes of an expansive majority, and at most, give them a 51-49 advantage over Democrats in the 2024 Senate races, setting Democrats up for victory in future midterm and Senate election years that coincide with presidentials, depending on the map that's up, the races that are up, the candidates that are there, because so far Democrats have done quite well in the Senate races for a variety of different reasons, but that common denominator being Donald J. Trump has really been a benefit ultimately to the Democratic Party nationwide. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.